we've got to roll with the times. Hence the new logo, which has a heart. Now, we initially thought of using a British lion. We wanted to use one of the lions in Trafalgar Square, stylised with the Union Jack in its mane. Fantastic. Because that says the British people waking up and saying, "Ah! We're going to rip the heads off the people who've taken this country to the cleaners." We thought, that's great. We had two different graphic designers working on it, and each of them said it doesn't really work. Then one of them found the Tory party had tried really hard to use the British lion as their logo. They got that silly tree instead. And about 4 years ago they tried really hard to do something with the British lion, and then they dropped it. It's either because in design terms it doesn't work very well, or they ran it past people, they spent hundreds of thousands of pounds on it, and found that it didn't quite work with the public. So they dropped it. So our designers said, look, if the Tories, with hundreds of thousands of pounds spent on British design, couldn't or decided not to use the lion, we shouldn't use it either. And at that point, it clicked with me, and the designer said, I'm so glad to keep it, because I told him. It's quite obvious all of a sudden. They said, the lion would have been wrong anyway, because it's aggressive. And why don't people vote for us? Time and time again, if you've knocked on doors or walked in the streets, you'll have heard, I'm sure, well, I agree with everything you do, but I don't really like the way you go about it, or your image is wrong. So for us to adopt as our image one of the most aggressive creatures on God's earth would not really be very sensible. On the other hand, the heart, and it is about love. This party isn't about hate. We don't hate anybody, as I said right at the start, other than the politicians who sold this country out for money, and their friends in big business and the banks and all the rest of it. They're the only ones we consider hating, not anybody else. We're motivated by love for our own kind, for our own country, our own heritage, our own children and the children of our people, and for all the peoples of the world, providing they're in their right place, and not coming over here and interfering in our place. So it is motivated by love, and the heart shows that very, very well. Then the designer did very clever things with it, and he's slightly de-accentuated everything except St George's Cross, which means it stands out slightly at a distance as being a bit more about England. And let's face it, the English are the most put upon people of the British family of nations, who need people to stand up for us. And it also emphasises the fact that there's a Christian cross in the middle of it. Now, you don't have to be a Christian to be in the British National Party. We've got people of all sorts of beliefs and none, but the fact is that you have to understand, if you're interested in preserving the heritage of this country and making this country a better place again, you have to understand that so many of our freedoms and the decencies that made this country a great place are based on Christianity. And if you take it out, you don't understand huge chunks of our culture. You don't understand huge chunks of our heritage. You don't understand where our freedoms came from, where the decency that made this country such a wonderful place comes from. It stems in many areas from Christianity. And especially as Islam grows and becomes an ever greater threat, because that is going to take over the Western world unless we stop it. And that's what its people are programmed to do. And the more Islam becomes an open and obvious threat, the more people will tend to fall back to the old certainties. And the greatest old certainty of all, the thing still used for the births, the marriages and deaths, and the great moments in our lives, is Christianity. And so we unashamedly state a claim that we are here to preserve Britain, and part of preserving Britain means preserving and honouring our Christian culture and our Christian faith. Nevertheless, in those working class areas, rock solid vote Labour, it's going to be difficult. But don't despair, because there's lots of seats, in fact, which are Lib Dem. And the Lib Dems have just committed electoral harry-kiri. They really are in terrible trouble. And people in Lib Dem wards vote Lib Dem not because they're liberals, not because they believe in their policies. They vote Lib Dem basically because they hate the Labour Party, they hate the Tory Party, they want an alternative. And we can hoover up those seats. And in a couple of years' time, we can hoover up Conservative seats as well. We can indeed win. And in areas like Barnsley, where the Labour Council is just turning the bink elections, from weekly to fortnightly, we can win in those places as well. So with a machine and the climate coming, we can go back to winning seats, because we've been working on it. The Alfred system that Paul mentions. You come to Barnsley, you'll begin to see what we're trying to do, and you'll see that having spent 5 years falling behind, being frankly complacent that our election system was good enough to carry on winning. We're playing catch up very rapidly. So that deals with that problem. We're going to go back to winning seats, and we're going to do so more than ever before, and we're going to be having a huge crack this May, particularly Stoke, and most of all we've got the Welsh Assembly elections coming up, which are on a proportional representation basis, and we are in with a serious chance of winning 2 seats in the south of Wales and the north east of Wales. And John Walker, who does a lot on the press work and so on, you might have heard John speak and so on, he's one of our really good people. And over the last few weeks, John's been running a fantastic campaign against a proposed mosque in Shotton on Deeside. Shotton was one of the great centres of the British steel industry. It was one of the things that, well, certainly in North East Wales, it was one of the great centres of employment. Once upon a time, it was one of the great centres of wealth. Now it's a wasteland. The only thing there is basically is shopping outreach malls for people from Chester and an increasing Muslim population which is determined to have its first big mosque. And John's led a campaign against that. Only just started, fantastic publicity. He put out 2,000, he and a couple of his local chaps, put out 2,000 leaflets the other day. He's had more than 40 inquiries already. That really is something. It shows what can be done when you get this sudden coincidence between an issue we can really pick up on and a bit of good hard local work and that public sympathy which is out there for us, but it hasn't yet quite coalesced, hasn't quite gelled. It's going to gel pretty soon. Not least because, I'll bring you on to a second problem now, a problem which is an external problem, nothing to do with us. It's a problem we have to do something about. The problem of the cuts being imposed on this country by the Condemned Coalition, which are going to get really brutal from April onwards. Really, really hard. There's very hard times ahead for this country when the Governor of the Bank of England, as he did yesterday, says that we're facing a situation where ordinary families are going to find it harder than any time since the 1920s. That's quite a warning. He's actually covering up the truth because it's not really any time since the 1920s. Parts of the 1920s were boom years. What he's saying is going to be worse than the 1930s. And that really is something pretty grim indeed as an outlook. Particularly because the British people, let's face it, people in the 1930s had had a pretty hard upbringing. Every single man was a survivor from the Second World War, unless he was in a reserved occupation. There was hundreds of thousands dead. There was only, I think, 6 villages in Britain which avoided losing at least one boy. The tiniest villages of all. There was only 6 avoided losing their sons in that war. They'd already been through depressions. One of the main reasons we had trouble at the start of the First World War and the Second World War was so many young lads had rickets because of malnutrition that there weren't enough, there were too many people who couldn't go and fight even if they wanted to go and fight. That was a really hard time in the 1930s, and in those days the British people were tough and got through it. I'm sorry to say lots of our people nowadays are soft and selfish and self-centred and juvenile in their attitudes, and they're not going to like hard times one little bit. But frankly, they've voted for hard times because they voted for Tory governments. They voted for a Tory government under Maggie Thatcher, which said, right, basically we're going to do away with manufacturing industry in this country and the pits and the steel as a way of breaking the trade unions and as a way of helping to create an integrated Europe. And then when they got sick of that, they voted for a Labour government, which promptly came to power, and the first thing they said was, we're not going to bother with manufacturing industry anymore, we're going to be a knowledge economy, and the Chinese will make everything. So they voted to give away manufacturing industry, and they voted first for the Tories, and then the Labour Party, with Lib Dem support, to take the fetters, the chains off the banks. Now you have to have banks, you have to lend money, to new businesses and so on. But a banking system should be there to serve the productive economy. Because banks don't do anything other than shuffle paper and figures around and ledgers on computer entries. That's all they do. They don't make anything you can eat, anything you can wear, you can't live in it. It's essentially parasitic. It's necessary. It's like the oil in the engine. You need the oil to keep the engine going around, but it's the petrol that drives the engine. It's the driver who decides where it goes. The oil is just a little bit of a means to the end. And banking should be a means to an end. But first the Tories, then the Labour Party, made banking the god.